Shots from the Hip presents Sports History. Here are Jason and Oz.
Let's talk about some sports history.
Yeah, let's go into history. All right.
What do you got?
There we go. Okay, so here, let me share my screen with you. I've got to get better at this. You can see my screen.
You bet.
Okay, right. So my talk this week it's a short one. It's not too long this week. Title of this piece, for those who cannot see it, is The Most Important Figure in Sports History, maybe. Alternatively, who the heck is William Webb Ellis?
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. All right, great. Well, here you go. Let me give you a picture. Maybe this will help. All right. So here is what the man looks like. Yeah, looks like a great athlete, huh?
We're going back.
All right. Looks like a great athlete. In fact, we are talking about a key event in 1823, right? To William Webb Ellis at the Rugby school in England. There is this plaque devoted to William Webb Ellis. Here is what the plaque on the building reads. It says, "This stone commemorates the exploit of William Webb Ellis, who, with a fine disregard for the rules of football as played in his time, first took the ball in his arms and ran with it, thus originating the distinct features of the rugby game." Okay.
Okay.
In fact, here you go. Here's a statue of the man at the same school. On the base, it reads in part, "The local boy who inspired the game of rugby football." Okay, to this day, the winner of the Rugby World Cup receives the Webb Ellis Trophy. Okay, problem is, it probably never happened. Okay.
Oh.
Right. Here is, one of these myths of sports that continues to this day. All right, so here's the thing. Nice
Because there's no
story.
actual video or photos.
No, not even close. Not even close. Again, this is basically the only picture we have of this guy.
Yeah.
Now, there are automatically some questions about this, right? First of all, Webb Ellis didn't seem to like the game very much at all, actually. He was really into cricket. He really loved cricket, really didn't like football that much. And like many guys in the 19th century, many intellectuals, he was a huge diarist, right? He kept all these journals about his life at the school, blah, 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 blah. Literally mentioned rugby once in like 40 years of journaling, right? So not too into the game, all right? But we'll come back to this later on, okay? All right, let's see. So the reason why this story begins, okay, was a contemporary of his, a classmate of his, a guy named Matthew Bloxham, right, gave an interview to the Rugby School newspaper in Warwickshire in 1876. Okay, so 53 years after Ellis supposedly took up the football and started running with it. Okay, Bloxham is 70 years old at this point. Okay, and this is the 1800s. Okay, people don't live too long. So he's 70 years old and he's talking about something that happened 53 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's the thing. Again, the key part here is with a fine disregard of the rules of football as played in his time. Well, this may also be wrong as well, by the simple fact that very few games were played, organized games were played, and in fact, there weren't any rules. This is one of the reasons, if any such event did happen, it would not have been against the rules because nobody said you can't pick up the ball, right? Literally, for about 50 years, the rules of rugby football and soccer in general were completely in flux, right? There wasn't one rule set at all. All right.
Right.
So later on, the soccer guys in the 1880s make up their rules of the game. We're making up the rugby rules as well, so to distinguish these two games from each other. So in 1895, the Old Rugbyian Society, and I love this word Rugbyian because Microsoft Word tells me this isn't even a word. So it's I think we don't say this word anymore. But the Rugbyian Society commissioned a report to determine the origin of the game. All right, again, there's this weird obsession, especially in the 19th century, to find the origins of these games. All right, I can talk a little bit more about football on a future episode, but 2 years later, okay, it was the old days, right? So in 1897, the report comes out based on research, and that's when we get the first mention of Webb Ellis in official papers. All right? Okay. So basically, the society came up with this story, pushed this story. In 1900, this is when the school erected this plaque, put up the statue, and said, okay, this is the official rule. I mean, this is the official story.
Yeah.
Right? By 1979, there was a big old book, what a very influential book about rugby, written entitled Barbarians, Gentlemen, and Players. Said that, quote, by giving pride of place in their report to the William Webb Ellis story, which correctly located the beginnings of rugby football in their school, the old Rugbyians were attempting to reassert their proprietorship of the rugby game at a time when it was escaping their control and changing in ways in which they disapproved. Right? So basically, pretty wild. The society decided to codify this story so as to say, we control the rules of this game. Right? It started here. We're still the boss. And that's it. This nice little story was created just to assert this. Now, if you're an old guy in America, this story may sound familiar. All right. Have you ever heard of Abner Doubleday?
That name actually sounds familiar, but I have no idea who he is.
All right. I can go into this a little bit more next time. But basically, he was a guy that certain Major League Baseball owners decided was the inventor of baseball.
Okay.
And again, as we know from last week's episode, when I talked about Dr. Jim Naismith, baseball was never invented, right? Rugby was never invented, right? And yet, these groups would like that control of history. Especially in Western Europe, we don't like this idea that history just happens, right? We want to think that people make history, right? That people are creators and people lead the armies into battle. But no, actually, a lot of this cultural stuff just happens. Just happens, right? Whether or not William Webb Ellis was the first guy to pick up the football in rugby school or not. So, a charming myth. Unfortunately, it's not true. And as always, the message is check out some rugby sometime. It's a great sport. If this podcast hasn't gotten you to do it, well, I don't know. At least watch Invictus. At least check out Invictus.
So if it's not true, why haven't they taken down the statue or the plaque or?
Oh, well, look, the rugby school in Warwickshire wants to, they have no interest in saying that this story isn't true.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, no interest. The thing is, like, as soon as this report came out, people just did not really take to it, right? When the book on rugby came out in the 60s, 70s, that was it. That was it. Like most British people, Australians, whatever, were just not down with the story anymore.
Yeah.
But again, myth, right? And as we will see, the same thing happened with Doubleday, in baseball. So, it's just people aren't buying it. You can't this is what we call in English, we call this fake lore, right? The anthropologists call this fake lore, right? You've heard of folklore before, right? Okay. Fake lore is this attempt to create an old story and to put it into the national consciousness, right? William Webb Ellis is an example of this, basically. Another great example is, I don't know if you know this, but when I was a kid, they told us these stories about Paul Bunyan.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, that's total fake lore. That's somebody saying, hey, America doesn't have a folk history. Why don't we make up some good old American stories? Johnny Appleseed is another one. This is this is a fiction, and they're trying to pass it off as folktale, but it's not. Now, the one example of fake lore that actually succeeded was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Right?
Wow.
Seriously, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is based on a novelty song, right? In, I believe, the 50s, maybe a little bit earlier, but that's it. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer started as that song, right? Then it became the cartoon that everybody saw. Then they put out books and toys and whatever. But Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was created. It did not come from nowhere. But really, that's the only example of fake lore that really caught on. It's really difficult to push these fake historical stories and have people believe them, like William Webb Ellis, like Abner Doubleday. All right? So next time we're doing baseball. We're going to do some baseball history in regards to the opening day.
Oh, yes, which is coming up soon.
Baseball. Yep.
Great history, few minutes.
Yeah, that's your history. 10 minutes.
10 minutes.